So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're happy to be offering this information session. So I think some people might be here for the actual information. Some people are just interested in what's going on. The intent of the session today is to walk you through our program, our post-market drug evaluation program at CADTH, and our current request for standing offers, request for proposals out in the community to see if there are folks that are interested in joining our network. And we're going to walk you through. That today. So really, there's two big, broad sections that we want to cover, which is an explanation of our PMDE or post-market drug evaluation program and the network within that. And the second half of the session will be around what is required in the RFP and what are the expectations for that application. So go to the next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we'll start with a bit of an overview of the PMDE program itself. Then we're going to introduce you to the CoLab network, which is a distributed network, which we'll talk about it in a bit. Then we're going to go through the request for standing offers section, and we'll finish off with some question and answer time for you to ask us anything you like. If we run out of time and we don't address all your questions, feel free to email us and we will then answer them offline. Next slide, please. So we're going to do a very brief overview of the program that we're talking about. So the program in question is PMDE, yet another acronym at CADTH and within the ecosystem, but I think this one is fairly intuitive for post-market drug evaluation. So our program has been in inception for just a couple of years now, and we're going to walk you a bit through what our intent is, what the objectives are, and what we're trying to accomplish with this program. So as you know, CADTH's really primary majority work in the past historically has been around the reimbursement review. We've also done some work in the optimal use space. So our customer base is primarily the federal, provincial, and territorial decision makers, and they're the ones who submit to CADTH. So we're not really deviating too far from that in terms of our PMD program is also still servicing the same customers. But now we're honing in on their needs as it relates to post-market safety and effectiveness of drugs. So these are drugs that have gone through the approval process. They've gone through the regulator. They've gone through our CDEC expert review of drugs, and they're currently in market. And so at that point, we deem that post-market. In this real-world setting, we want to take a look to see how this drug is working. Is it safe? Is there any changes in intended effectiveness or proposed effectiveness? And are they being used appropriately? We can talk a little bit about how they're being used in that real-world setting in terms of utilization. So the idea was to create this program, and within this program, we wanted to create a network, and that network was going to be comprised of experts in the area, in a variety of areas, which we'll go through, methods, data analysis, etc. And we've termed that network CoLab. So we think a clever play on words on multiple labs across our country, CoLab. And also one of the principles of this network is truly collaboration. So that's where we came up with that name, CoLab. Well, next slide, please. So I would like to just sort of situate you with where this lies within CADTH as an organization. So CADTH is the larger of the bubbles, and within CADTH, we have the PMD program. Within the PMD program, we have our CoLab network. So we've had 3 years of funding from Health Canada. We receive $8.6 million annually over 3 years. We're currently in year 2, and in September, we'll be entering year 3. So the idea is the PMD program is a coordination hub for the network, and the network is a part of the PMD program. And so we have 2 ways within which we constructed CoLab. So we have the first pool of individuals. These are core network partners. These are individuals that have received 3-year grant agreements, and this was done at launch. So this was done 2 Septembers ago, and there was an RFP for that process, and there was success. There were many applicants, and we were able to successfully identify 4 teams, which I'll highlight in just a moment. And then we had a pool of network collaborators. These are individuals that don't receive grants, but they have standing offer contracts, which is where we are today. So we were also able to identify 2 successful teams for network collaborators, but we're wanting to expand that pool, and this is why we have the current RFP up today. So we're discussing not grants, we're discussing these contract positions, which would have a standing offer contract, which we'll facilitate how funds are dispersed. Now, again, I wanted to continue to situate you where we are in terms of all the things that CADTH does and where this post-market drug evaluation program fits. So in the pre-market space, we have our CADTH Early Scientific Advice Program. This is where manufacturers can come in and work with our teams to get feedback and input on their clinical trial programs and the packages and evidence packages they're going to put forth in their submissions. This would lead then into the reimbursement review process where the drug submission has now been received and the dossier is reviewed and all the evidence is reviewed, and our CDEC, which is our drug expert review committee, puts forth their recommendation, and then the drug can then enter market. Now, once a drug enters market, anything on that tail end from then till it, and from starting from there until when it no longer is prescribed or used or is taken off market, is considered post-market. That's a fairly long tail. And that is the gap that we were trying to fill with this PMDE program. So really honing in on that post-market space. Now, this post-market aspect still allows us to be connected to the reimbursement review and early scientific advice, but really where we are right now is focusing on growing that post-market drug evaluation tail of the work that we do. So I don't really need to go into all of these objectives in a lot of detail, but I want to highlight just a few points. One, we wanted to improve and increase the capacity and capability of us to look at post-market data. So I think there's, there was some work being done in the post-market space, but not necessarily in an organized fashion with teams servicing decision makers. The second was to really improve our awareness and use of the data in our country, and doing that through our network and creating this collaborative pot of folks that can work within this environment. So making that linkage between not only data holders, but those that do the research, methodologists, data analysts, stakeholders, decision makers, all the folks that are in the ecosystem, we become a great coordination hub for that. We wanted to improve the use of post-market information in this decision making. So working with a lot of these decision makers over the years, we have heard that a lot of decisions are made in the absence of evidence, which is a scary thought. Sometimes it's just not available, or somebody hasn't done the work, or the needs are just too urgent, and that there isn't a lot of time to do a long thought out project. So by us being in place, we are now trying to create evidence that allow the decision makers to make those decisions based on actual evidence, which is great. The last thing is to really find our spot within the broader ecosystem outside of just Canada. So we're really looking at what can we do within Canada, which is awesome. There are a lot of really great groups within our own country that are either producing or appraising or hold data or do research. So how can we work more closely with them, bring them into an arena where they have access to resources and other individuals doing that work. And then the second is to look at those internationally that are doing great work in the post-market space. And this can include the FDA, Darwin EU, NCEP in France, so a variety of places around the world that are doing similar work, some much more ahead than us because they've been doing it for many years and have had a program in place. So how do we work with them? How do we learn from them? We're currently in the process of several collaborative pilots working with these groups to see how we can improve. So we're going to now introduce you to our CoLab network. So this is what you're applying to be a part of. Next slide. We'll take a look at geographically how this network is situated. You can see we have pretty good geographical representation across the country. We always strive to be as pan-Canadian as possible, but getting to the territories and some of the eastern provinces is a bit more challenging, but we're always working to find other groups that we can work with. Next slide. We'll introduce you to the teams. So these are the 4 granted teams. These are the teams that we call our core network partners. So we have, if you look at the expertise column, you can see we have groups that do a variety of things. So CNODES is a veteran team that's been around for many, many years in the landscape, led currently by Robert Platt, but has members like Sammy Suissa and Michael Patterson, based out of Montreal, doing observational research. Then we have CADTH, which is based out of Edmonton, and this is a group led by Scott Clarenbach, doing work in the HTA space, and they have expertise in health economics. And we have CODET based out of Ottawa, also being able to do quite a bit of HTA, and they have a patient knowledge mobilization capacity as well. And then we have CCRE, which is based out of Toronto, led by Calvin Chan. and many others that are really, really respected in the community doing work in the oncology space. So this was a new thing that we introduced into our network. So we have the ability to do both oncology and non-oncology work. Now, you can imagine with these 4 teams, we're not able to cover everything. And so this is why we've created these network collaborators. And this is an opportunity for us to scale up or scale down or pivot into a variety of different directions based on the need of the decision makers, who are our customers, the ones putting forth queries, and the ecosystem. And we never really know what's going to happen in the environment. A new disease can pop up or something becomes really urgent, and we would need to have that capacity. And this is where teams come in. So currently we have 2 teams. We have Kenim, also a veteran team led by Sasha out of Montreal. They do a lot of great work in the observational space, and through Anik, we also have access to the great pregnancy and motherhood registry that they have. So there's the ability to answer questions related to that. And then lastly, we have Exactis, also out of Montreal, another team that's really vested in the oncology space. They compile and gather patient information through their network. And so they have access to real world data, real world evidence, and they've been a part of some queries that we're currently working on. So this is a bit of a lay of the land of the teams that we work with. On top of this, we also have a pool of contractors that we use as required, sort of ad hoc, where if depending on what the needs are, we can reach out to folks and do some work. And that pool has included some great folks, including individuals from ODPRN, other folks at West that do work in systematic review, individuals that have vested interests and expertise in key areas, be it opioids or addiction or other things that you kind of never know when they're going to flare up. And so you need to have access to individuals that have expertise in that area. So why would you want to join? What are the benefits here? And this is not an exhaustive list. I think we're just hitting some of the highlights. I mean, clearly, I think it's a great collaborative environment, which is great. You get to conduct some really important work, and we pride ourselves in being very innovative, the ability to do things that are outside of the box. So if you're a creative thinker, if you like to problem solve, if you like to try things in a different fashion, this is a great spot for that. We're less tied to some of the regimen that's required for things like reimbursement review or other things. We have a bit of flexibility in being able to be creative, because at the end of the day, the idea is to answer the questions that are being asked. You be part of this community, this research community that's really, if you ever connect with those that are part of our network, we'll see that we really like the sort of in-person, hands-on approach, finding creative solutions. We're always open to hearing from our network and finding new ways to tackle old problems. And I think we've been really fortunate and been able to get over many hurdles that have plagued networks like this and initiatives like this before. I mean, and last, kind of blue sky, but I think, not to sound hokey, I think there's a lot of us, many of us, most of us believe in our team and our network that we're given a really great opportunity here to provide some evidence for those directly to those making the decisions. So it's not sort of a peer-reviewed journal article that's going into a journal with the hopes that you get some traction. Instead, this is literally going in the hands of those that are about to pull the trigger or make a decision. This can shape guidelines. This can allow for black box warnings. There's a lot of direct impact that your work will have for Canadians and helping their health. So these are just a few of the key things that we like to highlight, and that they're fairly important. And so we wanted to raise those for you. Now, I'm just going to pass it over to Nadine, and we're going to walk you through what the standing offer looks like and what are some of the key pieces that we're asking for, and what is the process that you have to go through in order to apply. Over to you, Nadine.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, I'm going to go over the RFSO process and some of the key deadlines that are coming up. So we launched our webpage with the RFP and the supporting documents in early December. We're asking for folks who are interested in submitting a proposal to submit a letter of intent by February 29th. And I'll get into what all of these things are in just a moment. March 8th will be the deadline to accept inquiries about the RFP. So that gives us a bit of time to respond and gives all the applicants a chance to see the response and fix their proposals if needed and submit on time. And then March 27th is our deadline to actually submit the full proposal. And at that point, we're going to have a peer review panel look over all the proposals. They will be adjudicating April 17th and 18th. So we ask that anybody who submits a proposal holds time in their calendar on April 18th. Anybody who is shortlisted on April 17th will get a notice with a time slot for the 18th. So that's an important date to mark in your calendars. So the letter of intent that I just mentioned is just a signal to us that you are intending to submit a proposal, and it just includes your name and your co-applicants' names, a host institution if it's applicable, and then a brief description of your expertise. And this is basically just to help us manage our peer review panel and know exactly what to expect and what kind of experts to have on the panel. So the proposal itself is divided into two parts. So you'll have seen on the website that there's a technical proposal as well as a financial proposal. So the technical is worth 75% of the overall evaluation, and the financial is worth 25%. Both have template forms on the website, so I encourage you to use those. Once they're filled out, PDF them before you send them to us. The financial proposal is pretty straightforward. We're just asking for hourly rates. So it's 1 page, and then the technical proposal is a maximum of 8 pages with some additional documents, which I'll get into shortly. So the technical proposal, this is really the most important part for us to judge if you'll be a good fit in the CoLab. So we're looking for suitability and expertise. So this is where you would describe like what kind of skill sets you would bring, you and your team. Are you applying as a team that does HTA, or are you applying as a team that does observational studies? Are you an expert in oncology, or do you have expertise in another area? We're also looking for any data assets that you have access to. Are you trained in any specific like common data models or anything like that would be very helpful. We're also asking for some relevant historical work. So if you have publications or reports that you want us to see, this would be the place to reference to that work. We're also looking to see if you have experience working with our customers. So that would be like the federal government, the provincial and territorial governments as well. And then feasibility. So this is where you would talk about the minimum and maximum amount of work that you could do per year. So the standing offer is a 2-year contract, but every year, how much work do you think you'll be able to take on? And then the additional is you're permitted to, you're allowed to submit 2 to 3 letters of reference. And then also if you are applying through a host institution, a letter of support from them, just to signal that they are aware you are applying and they are prepared to support you in contract negotiation or financial support, what have you. The financial proposal, as I mentioned earlier, is basically just hourly rates for everyone on your team. And here you would also mention, like, if you have a host institution, if there are any facilities that they're providing, if it's applicable. So it really depends on the type of work you're doing. And just a note that when the panel is reviewing the proposal, we will not open the financial proposal unless you're shortlisted based on the technical proposal. So yeah, I already covered the additional documents. So yeah, a letter from your host institution and then 2 to 3 letters of reference. And then for the applicants who are successful, the contract period would start September 1st, 2024, ending August 31st, 2026. And upon signature of the contract, we would issue a retainer between 50 and 100,000 So that will depend on the size of the team and the expertise and the skills that you bring. And we will fund as we go. So when you are assigned a query, we would top that up if needed. Otherwise, you would draw down from that retainer. So just to continue the timeline here, on May 17th, we would notify everyone if they were successful or unsuccessful. September 1st is the start of the contract, and then August 31st is the end of that contract. And here are a few additional resources in case you want some more information about the program or the CoLab network. These are some links that you can check out. And that's it for our presentation. So we'll actually take any questions at this point.
And feel free to pop your questions into the Q&A section of the Zoom platform. You can throw your question in there and we can see it, and we're happy to answer that. There's a question that had come in previously. I'll just I'll table it and I'll answer it. So the question is, does this have to be of a certain size? Does the team have to be of a certain size, or can this be an individual? So the answer is yes, you can be an individual and apply as an individual sort of contractor. We also can have larger groups. It depends on the skill set that you're offering. If it's to do something that you do as an individual, no problem. And if there's a team, same thing. You just need to sort of outline what skills you're offering and to bring to the network. And based on that, as Nadine had mentioned, that will dictate the retainer that will be offered based on your needs. So try and be explicit of why you would require more than less, or vice versa, and the number of individuals that would be part of your application. And I know sometimes the questions don't just pop out right now. You always can ask us offline if there's something that you want to know. Nadine was walking you through the timeline. You can see that there are a lot of so there's a lot of time that's left. So it's not that this is imminent. So you have time to think and ask questions and prepare your application.
So there's a couple questions actually. So the first one, what options are there for groups with standing offer contracts to decline projects if the team does not have capacity at time to conduct the work, or if the scope is larger than sorry, there's some words missing, can manage? How does this fit in with the retainer model? What happens to the retainer if it isn't spent down by the end of the contract?
Okay, so we'll break that apart in a couple sections there. So you most definitely have the opportunity to decline work if you don't have capacity or if you don't have the appropriate resources. I think part of what we do is to, if you're successful, is to better understand your team. And so we would have a clear line of sight as to whether or not it's even appropriate to ask your team. But teams will always have the opportunity to say, I don't know if we can handle this or not. And the idea is to, within the 2 years, give you work so that you would be able to continue. If that retainer isn't spent by the end of the contract, you would still be considered a member, and you would still consider to be offered work after that 2-year deal if the retainer is left unspent. So you would still be eligible to continue to do work with us if something becomes available. So while I don't want you to feel like there's pressure to complete work within the 2 years, although that is obviously, I think all of us, that's our desired outcome, is that you're doing work for the network, which is why we're in this place.
Okay, another question. So is using examples for the size of queries acceptable, as not all requests are the same size? Any advice there?
Size of queries.
Yeah, so I think we're talking about like historical work. So describing some of this historical work. If not, send another question. But I think what would be helpful is talking about, the type of work. And if it's about feasibility, also you can include, like, maybe you can do one smaller project and one larger project a year, that sort of thing. You can break it down into categories based on the expertise and skill set that you're bringing. Hopefully that answers. I don't know if you want to add anything, Terry.
Yeah, no, I think that's just it. If the question is you providing us some details on what type of query you can do and the size of the queries, that's great. And from our end, if the question is, how much work, what are the size of the queries that we're doing, we have a whole plethora of queries from really, really small ones to much larger ones. I don't think that folks that are network collaborators are stuck only doing small ones. They could be part of a query response team doing even larger ones. So we have examples of that now. So in terms of if that's the size question, we have a whole bunch of size that you can kind of choose. And if the question is from your end, helping us understand the size of queries that you can handle or the work that you've done historically, giving us some insight is helpful, most definitely.
Okay, should the reference letters come from individuals or organizations? Maybe I'll take this one. I think what would be most helpful is to have a letter of reference from someone who has seen your work or like used your work. Like, for example, if you've done work for Health Canada, an individual at Health Canada can write the letter. And it's more about just vouching for the quality of the work that you've done in the past. So it can be from the organization, but it might be easier to get an individual that you know a little bit better to write the letter.
I think all that I would add there is you want to make sure that just like anything, when you're getting a letter of reference, that the person is of a level of seniority where it actually makes sense. So somebody that would have a line of sight in terms of authority or approvals or use of the work, so a manager, director, or above to provide that letter.
Okay, in the budget, you mentioned an hourly rate that should be provided. What if multiple team members might be involved who have different salaries? Can you break down by team member type, skill set? Yes, so the form is a table, and all you have to do is add another row for each person and give their hourly rate. And then if you're at a host institution, you should also include like their overhead percentage that they charge for you to do work through them. Okay, that's it for now, but maybe we'll get a few more.
If there's any last minute questions, happy to take those. As I mentioned, yes, there is an opportunity to continue to ask questions, and we can answer those offline. And one just snuck in, which is great. One more.
Yeah, can scientific oversight, i.e. scientist salaries, be included in the budgets? The answer is yes. Yeah.
Great. So this session has been recorded and we'll be posting it so that if you want to come back and refer to something, feel free. And if you want to point this to some others who wanted to come or couldn't make it, again, feel free. And as I've said a couple of times, feel free to reach out to ask us any questions. We will then be posting any replies as a bulletin so everyone can see the question and the answer. I'm sure many probably have similar questions. We are really happy with the interest and folks are considering our network. We're happy to answer the questions. We're always looking for folks to expand what we do, to continue to grow the network, and this is one of those opportunities. So thank you again for your interest. We look forward to hearing from you, and hopefully we'll be chatting again in the future. Thanks, everyone.